Paul Dockerty, president of CEO. Paul and I go back 10, 15 years. We've known each other a long time, and he's the CEO of the Digit Group. Paul is not only an award-winning architect and the founder or founding father of building information, but he's got a favored position within the White House in the US, having been invited on several trade missions with President Obama and President Trump. And hopefully he'll be able to share with us the perspective on what's happening at home in the land of the free and the home of the brave. So together we'll examine how governments, cities, companies are now trading intelligence, infrastructure, and building new corridors of trust, and exploring how the new export challenges and the new export corridors are building up. And perhaps more critically, we'll look at how diplomacy and design can co-author trade strategies, and trade strategies that are more agile, more digital, and more sustainable, and in fact, more human. So let's begin. Paul, may I start with you? Paul, are you here?
Since I'm from the home of the brave and the instigator of this trade tariff stuff, of course. Yeah, thank you for setting that up and being the lone American on this panel. I just want to say I'm not involved with policy. I'm not an elected official. I'm just a private citizen that gets wrapped up in a lot of this stuff. I like to say that there was a documentary made about my life. It was called Forrest Gump. For some reason, I get involved with things that I'm not sure I'm supposed to be listening to. And that has a lot to do with the leadership around the world, which I think is very relevant in today's discussion. I lived in China for 12 years in Shanghai and made friends with people that were working on the Beijing Olympics at the time, the Summer Olympics in 2008. I was working with the Expo, in 2010 in Shanghai, the World Expo. And with that, I got introduced to elected officials there that are now leadership, including my friend President Xi. So I am Forrest Gump. Literally, I know these people. But what happened was when I was working over there, we were working on taking American goods, products, and services and distributing them into infrastructure projects that were called smart cities. What happened was when the Chinese were putting in their high-speed rails to connect these cities, once you got to the city, you were still using taxis and everything else. So they had to build subways and whatnot. So there was a lot of technology and innovation that was put into play there. That also then caught the attention of the White House because President Obama's people said, you're a private citizen working directly with the CCP. Tell us what you're doing. From there, we were then put onto a trade mission that had us go into the Middle East, again, to show what we were doing in China, but also, again, to promote American goods, products, and services. From there, I was introduced to a deputy crown prince named Mohammed bin Salman. So MBS is a person that I know. Also, the Al Nahyan family, the ruling family out of Abu Dhabi, we were introduced to, and the Al Thani family in Doha and Qatar. So with all of this access to power, we were given permission to start to take a look at large-scale projects. The one in Saudi Arabia wound up being a part of Vision 2030, which is now called NEOM, that I wrote about the city of the future. So the world's largest project, actually the largest project in the world since the Roman Empire, is being built right now. Because of that, the global supply chain was something that I just thought was always going to be there, right? The globalization effects, where we could source from anywhere. So we made a lot of friends in Europe. We made a lot of friends in Canada and, of course, in Asia in order to build these monstrous projects because it wasn't just the U.S. alone being part of the supply chain. Then we got introduced to the Trump administration because of my connections back into China. And he invited me to be part of his entourage when he visited Beijing. I actually sat at the state dinner. I sat in between Jack Ma and Yao Ming. And I'm a kind of like an average height guy. Jack Ma is very short, and Yao Ming, of course, is over 7 feet. So they call us the ladder table because we kept on going. But what was interesting about that entire experience was that he was very grateful because we were able to introduce ministries that they did not have access to and whatnot because I'm private, right? And I'm friends with these folks. When he was reelected this time around, it was something that I knew after talking with his administration and whatnot that he was going to have a large-scale effort in reestablishing the U.S. not as the money bags, as he calls it, the deep pockets of the world, that everyone should have their own fair share that way. And he felt that by going through a tariff reimagining, that he would be able to make it more fair, right? That for a long time, he felt that the U.S. was being taken advantage of. Now, as a private businessman, I took a cautious approach to this, knowing that the storm was brewing. But what was really concerning was not just my projects abroad and what these tariffs were going to do, especially to my budgets, but more importantly, what was going to go on at home. So we're feeling a direct effect, Nicholas, about groceries, simple things, the price of gasoline. The U.S. economy is going through a cold, but I feel, especially working overseas with these large scale projects, I feel like America's cold is turning into pneumonia in certain markets for others. Where is this going? If you read Donald's book called The Art of the Deal, this is that rope-a-dope effect. I'm going to say something, but I may not do it, but keep them on edge. Don't show your cards. But sometimes in business, that could work in a private project if you're doing a real estate project in Manhattan. I'm not sure if that really translates well into the world of diplomacy, decades long, century long relationships between people, and also having a better understanding that, yeah, America First is great, but America First doesn't mean that everyone else loses. So we're in a very interesting state right now here in the domestic U.S.
Well,
I'll be traveling overseas.
if you were looking at the steel industry, just the
Mhm.
information that's come out this morning, 75,000 jobs lost in the last 60 days. And it's supposed to be improving the market, and it clearly has got a domestic derogatory effect.
In that case, yes, but U.S. Steel is also partnering up, and that's again part of this rope-a-dope effect with Nippon Steel. So they're going to have a partnership, not an acquisition. So that means that, again, you got to take your medicine in order to get better. And that's the philosophy of this administration. Is it going to work across all industries? I just off the top of my head, I don't see that happening. But I think there's going to be a lot of traditional measures that are going to be challenged. Like you just said, you can hop on that headline from this morning, and I have Bloomberg on all the time, just going, it's like a sporting event right now. There's a play-by-play going on. What I'm looking for is the color commentary. So I'm really interested to hearing our other fellow panelists discuss what they're hearing from where I'm at. I'm really interested in Michael's perspective, being part of the Canadian Trade Administration in LA, because I'm sure he's seeing it as well, what's happening here domestically. And then I'll be traveling over to the Middle East by the end of this month, and I will get a firsthand effect about what his travel meant to that region over there last month. One thing that I want to just throw out there is that I was briefed. Unfortunately, had a family emergency that I was not able to join them on that mission to Saudi and to Qatar and finally over into the UAE. But the big deals are not the deals that were announced. $500 billion investment in the US by KSA, 1.2 trillion by Qatar, and 1.4 trillion by Abu Dhabi. Those were headlines. But what was hidden underneath were the laws that the Trump administration had to jump through in order to get GPUs and that type of technology out of the US and placed in foreign countries, because the Biden administration made that unlawful. And to undo the law, you'd have to go through Congress. He didn't have time. So what was not announced in the media was that all of those announced supercomputer data centers for AI that are going to be put in those three countries are now part of the US embassy. This is data embassies, meaning that sovereign soil of the United States. So that's how come the GPUs can actually be sent over there. That actually then brings up a thing about trade that you were mentioning as in your opening, Nicholas, that should we be treating our own data as our own sovereign soil? Because at the time, everyone's thinking, oh, we're going to have this AI thing, and I'm throwing my data up into the cloud. There's lots of hallucinations that happen because of that, because we're not trusting the data. What happens when we control our own data? We have our own cybersecurity, just like the US embassies now are saying these data centers are part of the United States. What happens when it's part of Nicholas, or it's part of me, or it's part of anyone on this call? And we're responsible for that. And AI touches the data to improve what we are doing, how we live, and that type of thing over time. It's a very interesting concept. That was very clever what they
And
came
I think that just at the moment, whether you call it a perfect storm or an imperfect storm, with everything that's going on with the administration and the effect that it's having around the world, at the same time, in the same 4-year cycle as what is likely to happen with AI, I think it's both exciting and terrifying in the same breath. So thank you, Paul. I'm delighted to have you on board, and we'll circle back round towards the end if there's any more questions. But again, thank you very much indeed for your time. But I do have to just end on one. How come you became a session pianist with David Bowie?
Yeah, back in the day, I was actually standing in line signing up for my next selection of courses for the next semester at New York Institute of Technology, is where I went to architecture school. And there was a guy standing in front of me because back then there was no online. You had to stand in line and hopefully get into the classes. And he had staff music. I'm a classically trained pianist, and I was watching him do his writing his music. It was awful. So I stopped him. And he said, "Wow, you really know your music. I'm a sound engineer at SIR Studios. Why don't you come on down and help out a band that just lost their keyboard player? Just sit in for a few sessions. It would really help them out." I quit school that Monday. My mom loved that, and I became a Warner Brothers recording artist. And what happened is I was then placed into this rotation in New York City that there's lots of guitar players, lots of bass players, lots of drummers, but then not a lot of keyboard players. So I got to sit in with David Bowie's band, and it was terrifying. I was 21 years old, and here David Bowie walks into the sound studio. I froze, but
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very
yeah.
much indeed. Great to have you on board. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.